Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're embarking on a genuinely fascinating journey, one where ancient wisdom literally collides with modern science. If you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by your own thoughts or, just wondered about the fundamental nature of reality, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to explore how texts written thousands of years ago actually align with cutting-edge quantum physics, all to help us master our minds. But first, I really want you to ask yourself, who is actually driving your life? In our modern world, we're constantly battling stress, emotional burnout, and just endless distractions, right? It's incredibly easy to feel like we're just passengers in our own bodies, kind of just reacting to whatever life throws at us. So how do we take back control? How do we find real clarity in our actions and thoughts to actually excel in a life that's full of doubts and struggles? Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 1. The war within us. 2. The chariot of the mind. 3. Heroes versus villains. 4. Ancient wisdom, modern science. 5. 3 gates to ruin. And finally, 6. Cultivating a peaceful life. Section 1. The war within us. Let's start by understanding our inner tendencies. So before we can even begin to find inner peace, we have to acknowledge the battlefield. And that battlefield, it's entirely psychological. Chapter 16 of the Bhagavad Gita gives us this incredibly profound framework for it. It categorizes our human tendencies into 2 broad groups, divine, or daivi, and demonic, or asuri. Now, it is absolutely crucial to understand here that this classification isn't about pointing fingers or judging other people. Not at all. It's a mirror. It's a highly practical tool for introspecting and refining our own consciousness. Section 2. The Chariot of the Mind. This is an ancient model for modern psychology. So how exactly do we manage these competing inner tendencies? Well, we can look to the Katha Upanishad, which offers a brilliant, easy-to-understand metaphor. It says, the self is like a chariot, the intellect is the driver, and the mind the reins. Let's really break this analogy down, because honestly, this is your ultimate guide to the art of living peacefully. Imagine your body as the chariot. The horses pulling that chariot are your senses, your eyes, your ears, your desires, and they are always wanting to run toward the next shiny object, whether that's a notification on your phone or a sudden craving for junk food. Now, the reins attached to those wild horses, that is your mind. And the one holding those reins, that's your intellect. That's your capacity to actually discriminate and make choices. When the driver, your intellect, loses focus, those horses run completely wild, pulling you in 100 different directions. And that's exactly what leads to anxiety and chaos. But when your intellect firmly grips those reins, controlling the senses, the chariot moves purposefully toward your actual goals. Section 3. Heroes versus villains. Daivi and Asuri Sampag. Now, what's really interesting is what happens when we control the chariot versus when we just let those horses run wild. We essentially create our own inner heroes and villains. When our intellect is driving, we cultivate Devi Sampad, those divine traits like fearlessness, compassion, and purity. Epic figures in ancient Indian texts, like Lord Rama, perfectly embody this. Despite being completely unjustly exiled, he remained calm and focused on his duty. On the flip side, Asuri Sampad represents demonic traits. We're talking pride, anger, delusion. Think about figures like Ravana, right? His downfall wasn't due to some external force. It was his own unchecked ego. The demons aren't out there. They are our own uncontrolled impulses. Let's look a little closer at just one of those divine traits, fearlessness, or abhayam. True fearlessness means acting with intelligent caution, not just foolish bravado. For example, if you stand right in front of a hungry lion, that isn't fearlessness. That's foolhardiness. Cultivating these divine traits means using your intellect to know exactly when to be brave and when to be cautious. The Katha Upanishad illustrates this beautifully through the story of a brave young boy named Nachiketa. He literally confronts Yama, the god of death. And Yama tells him that in life, we essentially face 2 paths. Preya, which is the path of easy, instant gratification, and Shreya, the path of long-term goodness. Whenever you choose studying over doom scrolling on social media or patience over snapping in anger, you're choosing Shreya. Nachiketa proves that true strength actually lies in making those hard, righteous choices. He didn't let the horses of his senses just chase easy pleasure. His intellect actively chose the path of lasting peace. Section 4. Ancient Wisdom, Modern Science. Let's see where the Gita actually meets quantum physics. This ancient understanding of the mind is incredible, but where exactly does it intersect with modern science? Well, humans have obviously always wondered about reality. Thousands of years ago, the Rig Veda's Nasadya Sukta contemplated the origins of the cosmos with this really deep speculative inquiry. Fast forward to 1915 with Einstein, and then 1927 when George Lemaitre proposed the expanding universe, which laid the groundwork for the Big Bang theory. Both those ancient meditators and our modern physicists are basically looking at the exact same fundamental question: what is the true nature of reality? And crazy enough, they found strikingly similar answers. The Gita teaches the concept of Maya. Now, that doesn't mean the world is fake, but rather that the solid, separate reality we think we perceive is actually fluid and completely interconnected. It's an illusion of our perception. Amazingly, quantum physics tells us the exact same thing. At the subatomic level, matter is mostly empty space, and particles exist in superposition, meaning they are in multiple states simultaneously, until they are actively measured. The definite reality we see only emerges from this underlying quantum fuzziness. Which brings us right to the observer effect in physics, suggesting that consciousness actually plays a vital role in shaping reality. In fact, pioneering physicists actively turned to Eastern philosophy to make sense of this. Nobel laureate Erwin Schrödinger once noted that, in all the world, there is no kind of framework within which we can find consciousness in the plural. It is a false construction. Physicists like him, Heisenberg, and Oppenheimer found that these ancient texts actually provided the conceptual framework to understand that at the deepest possible level, everything is connected through a unified consciousness. Section 5. 3 Gates to Ruin. The Pitfalls of the Uncontrolled Mind. So, if we're all fundamentally connected, and our intellect needs to steer our reality, what actually causes us to crash? Well, the Bhagavad Gita explicitly identifies 3 specific traps that will absolutely collapse our potential if our intellect drops the reins. Number 1 is lust, or just unchecked desire. Number 2 is anger, which the texts describe as a fire that quite literally burns the mind and destroys our reasoning. And number 3 is greed, an insatiable attachment to material things. If you let the wild horses of your senses run toward these 3 gates, it inevitably leads to mental, moral, and spiritual ruin. But how do we actually avoid these gates in our modern, super stressful lives? We practice finding shanti, or peacefulness. When anger flares up, when that fire starts burning because, say, someone cuts you off in traffic or you read a really infuriating comment online, we have to exercise control. A highly practical tip derived from all this wisdom is actually really simple. When you feel that rage, just try counting backwards from 100 to 1. It distracts the mind, it gives your intellect a second to grab those reins back from your runaway emotions, and it restores your tranquility. Finally, Section 6, Cultivating a Peaceful Life. How we can take the reins today. So how do we take the reins right now, today? One of the greatest ways to keep the intellect strong is to simply practice daya, or compassion. Because quantum physics shows us that we are deeply intertwined, and the Isha Upanishad tells us that everything in the universe is a shared divine gift, it just naturally makes sense to show compassion to all beings. When you begin to see life as a web of interconnected gifts, rather than some fierce competition for resources, your greed and your anger, they just naturally start to dissolve. So the crucial takeaway here is this. Achieving mastery over your mind isn't just a one-and-done event, it requires a daily playbook. First, reflect daily on your tendencies. Literally ask yourself, am I acting from divine or demoniac impulses right now? Second, just as the Isha Upanishad teaches, accept life as a gift without extreme attachment to it. And third, seek higher wisdom. Continually feed your intellect so it stays strong enough to manage those wild horses of your senses. Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to ponder. Your intellect is in the driver's seat. Your senses are ready to run. So, where will you steer your chariot today? Will you let your emotions pull you toward chaos? Or will you actively take the reins and drive toward clarity, compassion, and peace? The choice is entirely yours. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.